Join us by the fireside for our evening tales of true life's strange experiences with things that lie beyond the veil of the known and into the misty depths of the mysterious and unknown.
The homeless lady. It was in college, and I rented a house with my newlywed wife. We lived a few lots down from a church that was next to a Wendy's on the other side. I get home one day from a double shift, and I walked over to the Wendy's to grab some dinner. On my way back, I noticed a large group of people at the church back door. And as I get to the edge of their parking lot by the sidewalk, I saw an older woman standing there, kind of looking cold and somewhat upset. There's also a bus stop on that corner, and I just figured that she had missed her bus, so I asked her if I could help her. I figured I'd let her know the next bus would be along soon, maybe give her fare or something like that. It turns out that the church was doing a thing for the hungry and they were giving away bags of groceries. Except they underestimated the need and she got left with nothing. Since I lived right there, close to the church, I invited her into my house. I heated up some soup for her, I gave her some bread and milk, and we chatted for a while, for maybe about half an hour. I don't remember almost anything about the conversation, honestly. Towards the end, I got a little bit nervous because my now ex wife was a jealous, miserable person, and I just didn't want to fight about why some stranger was in our house and so on. I explained the situation, asked the lady if she had a way home. She said she always walked. I asked her if she had a home. She said she did. And I packed up a grocery bag full of groceries for her, canned goods, loaf of bread, peanut butter, probably some pasta and sauce, and, nothing special. So she thanked me, gave me a hug, took her groceries, and left out of the back door. Now, there was a big clearing, and I could see quite a ways in all directions out of my back door. A few seconds after she walked out, I glanced out of the window and I didn't see her. Now, there is no way that I could have missed her. The field behind us was flat. I could see the whole thing and it was well lit. She wasn't there. And I opened the back door to glance around the house to confirm that she wasn't there, but no big deal. I figured she went around to the front, to the sidewalk, and was headed home that way. No more than 10 seconds had passed before I was on the front porch to say goodbye and just see her off. She never appeared. I cannot stress to you how impossible this would be. Either she goes down my little walkway and past my front door, and in 10 to 15 seconds she'd make it no further than my front yard, or she's off in some direction in the back field and I can see her. There's no third way. So I got curious. I went over to the church the next day and I asked about her. I mentioned the commotion I saw at their back door, their food drive thing, and I asked about the lady they had to turn away. I described her to the detail. They all looked at me like I had three heads. There was no food drive or any event of any sort the previous night. The people at the church had no idea what I was talking about. I still think of her sometimes. I can still see her face in my mind, the wrinkles, the shoulder length hair with a good bit of gray. She was a little shorter than me. The little blue eyes, that she had a nice smile. I still wonder who she really was and why she happened to come into my life at that moment. Because she was, as far as I was concerned, she was a physical person. But there is no way that she could have just gone away from my house without me seeing her. Well, it sounds like for whatever reason you needed to meet this lady, and it certainly sounds as if there was some kind of weird thing going on because it doesn't sound like she was a physical person, judging by the fact that the church didn't know what you were talking about, and you were right there and you saw her and everything. So that's A very fascinating experience. Paranormal experiences in my life. I'm just going to start off by saying that my whole life has been, a series of paranormal events, and it's just always been a thing. I have had many things happen that just don't have an explanation that makes sense in ways that we currently know. I have two stories to share. The first one was when I was about 22 years old. I had a Vauxhall Corsa car, and I had spent a lot of time and money putting a bigger engine into it, making it extremely safe and ready for use on a track. It had a safety cage, a fire extinguisher system. No expense was spared when it came to safety. One Saturday, I was driving to work at 8:20 in the morning, something around that time. It was just a simple drive on a main road. I was in the outside lane and I was probably doing about 60 miles per hour and just about to pass a Peugeot 206. As I was just about to pass, I noticed the driver's arm reach to his left, right-hand drive in the UK, as if he was going for his glove box. As he did this, his car just swerved to the right and into me. I later figured his reaching left with his left arm had some impact on his right arm. He hit into me, which sent me into a spin on the road. When the car straightened out again, I was launched up a barrier, through a road sign and through a tree, down a hill, and I landed in a farmer's field. As the crash happened, everything slowed down. I recall everything that happened. At first, I remember seeing the sky, ground, as the car was flipping. I was able to recall that this wasn't right. The metal crunching and glass shattering, along with the jabs into my skin of thousands of shards of tiny glass, was so vivid. And then black. And the black turned to white. And then I saw a silhouette of a tree. This tree then gets hit by lightning, and then I am zoomed towards the tree where a floating head of my mom is shouting at me. There is no audio, but she is shouting. She disappears, and then I am overcome with the smell of a cereal, which in the UK is called Weetabix. This is when my grandmother's face appears. My gran died when I was 9, and she is smiling, and then she tells me to wake up over and over. And finally, she shouts at me. As this happens, I wake up on the side of the main road. 7 people witnessed what had happened and had climbed down and dragged me out of the car. They dragged me up the embankment onto the grass verge. I was unconscious, and they said I viscerally woke and was really startled. But then I passed out into a sleep-like state. This doesn't end here. My parents had split when I was 8, and they had spoken maybe 4 times in that time since. At the time of the crash, I hadn't seen my dad for about 5 years or so. His mom, my gran, was the gran I saw during my little incident during the crash. When I was at the hospital, they gave me something which brought me around, but I was in a state of feeling high, but able to understand what was going on. My face was smashed to bits. I nearly lost an eye. They had to perform facial surgery on me whilst I was awake, something to do with the facial muscles. A tree branch pierced the driver's door and cut my stomach open. My mom turned up, all shook, and suggested that she call my dad to let him know. After all, it wouldn't be fair for him to find out from someone else what happened to his son, even if they didn't speak to each other. She called him, and when he answered, the first thing he said was, "What has happened to him?" As it turns out, his sister, my aunt, had been woken up from a nightmare where her mom, my gran, was pleading with her to look out for me. She kept saying I was in danger. My aunt had been calling my dad at 5 a.m. multiple times to try and let him know, but there was no answer. Just under 3.5 hours later, I'm seeing my gran's face, telling me to wake up from a car crash that I had no right to walk away from. A few weeks later, me and my cousin are looking at some old Polaroid photos I had taken of the car, and there were two distortions. One was on the driver's door in the same exact spot where the door was pierced by the tree branch. Another was in the top left corner, and it looked like NS, NS being the initials of my grand. We checked digital photos of my car, and we find one which has another blemish right where the tree came in. The second story may be graphic for some, by the way, just so I'm just warning you. This was when I was 25 years old and living with my mom's younger brother. It was a Saturday night, and me and my uncle and a couple of friends had ordered a curry in, and were going to watch a film together. The curry had just turned up and everything was set up. I had chicken tikka masala, which is my absolute favorite. I had put my fork into a piece of chicken and I noticed my uncle looking at me, smiling, watching me about to take my first bite. He said, "Go on, son, after you." And I raised my fork to my mouth. As I did so, my body physically jolted. The jerking reaction sent my plate into the air and onto the floor. And then I started shouting, "Mom, Mom, Mom!" I couldn't stop, and I got into an absolute frenzy, and everyone leapt into action, trying to calm me down. I was physically violent and lashing out, shouting her name, and eventually sobbing hard and demanding to go and see her. My uncle and friends, seeing how bad I looked, said we would go, so we loaded into a car and went. As we are driving there, I am feeling physically sick. I'm sweating profusely, and the whole of my body feels depleted. Like, genuinely, writing this makes me remember how it felt. It was like I was paralyzed, but I wasn't. It is so hard for me to explain. Anyway, they kept saying everything is okay, and within 10 minutes, we were there. It was a terraced house, and I saw the blinds to the sole downstairs window were drawn, so you couldn't see in properly. The front door opened into another entry, so looking through the letterbox gave you a view of another door. The four dogs she had were going absolutely insane barking, and so I knew something wasn't right. I was able to stand on the windowsill of the sole window and then crouch down so I could see in through the small angle of the top of the blinds. I immediately noticed the wooden floor was covered in blood. So we all gave it our all and we kicked the front door in. I was the first in and I found my mom on the floor surrounded in a pool of blood. Her four dogs were soaked in her blood and going absolutely frantic. There were slide marks and paw marks everywhere. Still, to this day, I sometimes think of those poor dogs and what must have been going through their mind, seeing their human like this. It honestly was absolutely traumatic to see. It was what I assume a murder scene would look like. We would come to find blood for months later, which served as a harsh reminder as to what happened. My mom had taken a load of warfarin to thin her blood, and then cut from her wrist to her armpit on both arms to try and bleed out. I scooped her fragile body up and I told them fetch as many towels as possible. I took duct tape from the utility drawer and then wrapped the towels around her arms and then wrapped them tight in duct tape. When she was taken to the hospital and stabilized, etc., we did have her sectioned for 4 weeks at the recommendation of the doctors to understand why she did this. Anyway, I'm very happy to say that she is okay now. They had said that my actions of wrapping her arms in towels and then duct tape saved her life. These are just two things that have happened in my life. I'm not usually the type to sit and discuss ghost and paranormal stories. It's just that my life has had big events happen that most people wouldn't experience just in one. I've saved 2 lives. I've had countless paranormal and ghost experiences. I myself have died 4 times. Sometimes I can spend hours just thinking of the strange and unexplained events I've been through, and I find it utterly fascinating. I've never really told these stories much, and I don't generally go on websites and discuss these things, but I just felt like doing so now. Perhaps it's just the right time to share this. Wow, that's a pretty dramatic example of how these things sometimes work in our lives. For those of us who have had dramatic paranormal experiences, and when these things happen, you can just see the reality of this. There's little room for doubt, really. That's I guess that's what I'm trying to say. The apartment. When I was quite young, we moved to a unit in an apartment complex which my dad had bought. Nothing much, but it was kind of a cold apartment. We lived in South India at the time, and well, we wrote it off as the balcony facing south and the corner unit acting as a draft for the northwest monsoon winds. But we couldn't really find any other explanation. It was a little bit crazy. I had a series of episodes of sleep paralysis, which I hadn't had before. My brother had suffered severe asthma, and it just got worse. My parents were also fighting, with both of them being violent towards each other, and we had my aunt, uncle visit more than once to just try and, make peace between them. I always saw a thin shadow of a guy out of the corner of my vision, and my parents lost all of their money, and we ended up nearly homeless. It was like since we moved into that place, everything just started to go wrong. The craziest thing that made me doubt that any of this was natural was once when we had a maid lady who came to clean the apartment, and she kept insisting to my mom that something wasn't right at this house. Something was just off. She said she was a seer or a medium of some sort, and that she would do a small prayer. This involves lighting a camphor on top of a lemon and basically holding it and drawing three circles around us when she said her prayers. She did it for each of the family members without incident. I was the last to go. She lit the camphor and placed it on the lemon and started. When she started her second circle, the camphor rolled off the lemon. No big deal. She'll get it back on, I guess. Except when she went to pick it up, the camphor, which was still burning, rolled away from her. So she went to pick it up once it completely stopped rolling, and it was still. She held the lemon on one side and her hand around the camphor to scoop it onto the lemon, but it rolled away, dodging her hand in a zigzag pattern. By now, all of us were just freaked out because this just didn't happen naturally. Then, another 2 to 3 more times, she was finally able to scoop it up. She continued her prayer, and before completing her third circle, she fainted, and the camphor stopped burning. I caught her, and we got her water and some soda. We gave her a glass of coffee, too, once she was up. She refused to look me in the eye, and she refused to return to the house. We ran into further significant financial and health troubles after this. We couldn't get another buyer, and we also came to know that the guy who sold it to us attempted suicide soon after moving out due to financial problems. He did end up recovering, by the way. We moved away from the unit to another unit in the same apartment after a year or so, and despite selling it at a loss, we could never recover financially and even health wise for over 5 years afterwards. I met the lady on the street when I was an adult, and she approached me and told me she was glad I was okay. She seemed genuinely surprised to see me and looked me in the eye. So, all is well, I guess. And it sounds to me like there was some kind of evil presence in that apartment that was making everything go wrong for us. It certainly does sound as if there was some kind of, I don't know, like some kind of curse or, some presence in that apartment that was, its goal was to make things go wrong for anybody who moved in there. Either it was like that for everybody who moved in there or just for your family. But I expect it would have done that to anybody. And it makes me wonder what the people who have moved in after you, or eventually someone's going to move in there, what they're experiencing as well. You kind of think that some of these places would be best off if they were just completely closed up, boarded up, maybe even burnt down if it was possible. But anyway, great story.